We have several graduate alums here with us tonight who are working and succeeding in industry, and we're very excited to hear from them. My name's Tamara Shops. I'm the Assistant Dean of Graduate Strategic Initiatives here at UC San Diego in the Graduate Division, and I'm very excited to be working with the grAdvantage program. grAdvantage provides a suite of resources for graduate students and postdoctoral scholars here at the university that help you develop critical leadership, teamwork, and communication skills that will ensure that you have a competitive edge in the job market, which, as all of you know, is very important. So raise your hand if this is your first grAdvantage event. Almost all of you, that's awesome. Welcome, I hope this is the first of many grAdvantage events that you attend. The flyers that are on your chairs, if you don't have a flyer, there's many more outside. But the flyer that's on your chair explains a little bit about the suite of offerings that we have through grAdvantage. So this is one of many career panels that we partner with the GSA, the Graduate Student Association, on. We also have a certificate program that we partner with Extension on in leadership and teamwork. They have a fall application deadline, so if you're interested in that for next year, keep that on your radar. We also have questioning career transition groups and a group called Triton Travelers for PhD students or postdoctoral scholars that are trying to decide if they want to go academia route or out into industry. So if you're kind of grappling with that question, this would be a great program for you. We also have Career Development Week that happens during spring break, and it's many different events that happen during the week that no one has classes, so it's easier to get to those. And it's really everything from cover letter workshops, LinkedIn workshops, networking events, being able to meet people from different disciplines and learn from them. So keep that on your radar as well. And we hope that grAdvantage will continue to grow and change. It's in its 4th year. So if you have new ideas for programming that you'd like to see with grAdvantage, I encourage you to reach out to the grad division and the GSA and let us know how we can best serve you. So a special thanks to all of the grAdvantage partners. I've mentioned some of them already, but I just want to give shout outs to the Career Center here on campus, Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS, Extension, the Graduate Student Association, the Office of Postdoctoral and Visiting Scholars Affairs, Alumni Relations, the Department of Theater and Dance, and I could keep going on because what we do with grAdvantage is partner across campus with other offices and other academic departments who are doing really exciting things and able to develop professional skills in our students. So also a special thanks to Laura, who's running our audiovisual and our live stream tonight, and her crew, and particularly also to Nicole Hoffner, who I'm going to pass the mic off to and get us kicked off for the night. Nicole has worked incredibly hard on this event to organize, so if we could offer her a round of applause and thank her tonight. So thank you much, and let's get started with the panel.
Thanks so much, Tamara. Hi, all. So like she said, I'm Nicole Hoffner. I am the Professional Development Coordinator with GSA. I care very deeply about all of our professional development. So like she said, please reach out if there's anything you feel concerned with or would like to see on campus regarding some of those events. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to ask the panelists if each of you could just give us a really brief kind of introduction of you guys and your transition from graduate school into the workplace, some of the events that took place, and where you are now in the role that you have.
Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here. My name is Bożena Pająk. I'm originally from Poland. I came to the US for my PhD, so I came here to UC San Diego, where I did my PhD in linguistics. I graduated in 2012. And I've always been interested in languages, so that's what brought me into linguistics, and that I still have that interest. After my PhD, I did a postdoc at University of Rochester in brain and cognitive sciences. And then I worked at Northwestern University as a lecturer and researcher. And after that, in 2015, I joined Duolingo, which is an educational technology company. It's a language learning app, if you haven't heard of it. So there, I'm the head of learning sciences, and I get to pursue my interest in languages and in language learning I help improve how Duolingo teaches languages.
Great. Yeah, so my name is Andy Chang. So my background is I did my undergraduate work at the University of Arizona, and I came over to UCSD in 2005. And at that time, I was very young and naive, and I said, I'm going to do the dual degree program. And I did the PharmD PhD program at that time, because 8 years seems like nothing when you're young. But so I did that. So I did my PhD within the BMS, the Biomedical Sciences program. And my PI was Jing Yang, who is currently at the Cancer Center, I believe. And so I did my PhD with her, and then I completed the 4 years also of the School of Pharmacy curriculum. From there, I moved over and I did a postdoc fellowship with Pfizer, La Jolla, just kind of across the street. I did that for about 18 months, and I kind of got lucky. There was an opportunity there that allowed me to kind of work there full time, kind of post-training. So I worked as a clinical pharmacologist, and so that's probably a little nebulous to a lot of people. So if you're interested in that, I can give you a little more detail about that as well. But as a clinical pharmacology lead, I was within the global product development group at Pfizer Oncology. So we work with late-stage clinical trials, doing clinical pharmacology studies in that space. So I did that for about 3.5, 4 years, and then I recently transitioned over to medical affairs within Pfizer. So they call us the field medical directors, but most of you, if you guys are familiar with life sciences, kind of know them as MSLs or medical science liaisons. And so currently I've been doing that about 6 months. I support Pfizer Oncology still. And my territory, which I will brag to you about, is Southern California and Hawaii. So that's where I do most of my kind of work right now. So yeah.
So I thought maybe we could start by talking about the transition from graduate school into that first position. Maybe some of the things you experienced in those first application stages, interviews, some of the experiences you had, or impressions or skills that you found important. It was a broad question. So yeah, just that first transition, what was that like for you?
Sure, I can go. I think transitioning from academics, at least I was kind of lucky. I did a postdoctoral fellowship in industry. So I think that was kind of like my doorway into kind of getting into industry and kind of working with people and learning and networking with a lot of people within Pfizer. But in order to get that, I think the biggest thing was that when I was a grad student and in pharmacy school, I pretty much knew I didn't want to stay in academics. So through different opportunities on campus, through the grad program and also through the pharmacy school, they had usually opportunities to meet with people within industry. I usually took advantage of those types of things. And then the other thing I tried to do was really trying to network within alumni that transitioned into industry, getting their perspectives and kind of networking through that. So through that kind of method, I kind of heard about the fellowship that was, postdoc fellowship that I was part of. And so I kind of threw my name in there, and yeah, it was kind of, and it's totally cliche to say, but it was kind of networking. So yeah.
So you would encourage everyone to come talk to you to network in that way?
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. And like not even networking like with outside people, because I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't like to quote unquote network, because it's always uncomfortable just to kind of go up to somebody cold and just have a conversation. I think really networking with people like your peers, like I think I've able to kind of, my old classmates from graduate school and pharmacy school, I still keep in touch with them, a lot of them, and use that network. And that's still a form of networking, keeping up with, speaking with them, and people who you're a lot more comfortable with, and probably people you can get like much better and much more in-depth answers for a lot of things that you want to know. I think networking with them is probably almost more important than going out to kind of cold situations where you're like, okay, I don't know anything about this person, but I'm just going to randomly start talking to them, because sometimes that could be hard to do. Yeah.
And I can definitely confirm that networking works. I agree with Andrew said that your peers are a good circle to keep up with, because they'll start getting jobs and you'll have a chance to talk to them about the kinds of jobs that they got or they interviewed for, and they'll be able to give you some more information. My case is a little bit different. I feel like it's a little bit unusual. I didn't really have a chance to think it through in a way, so I wasn't sure. When I was working at Northwestern University, I was a researcher and lecturer there, and I had doubts about academia. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay. I really liked research, but I felt like it was really hard to stay motivated. I wanted to have more impact. And so I started thinking about, okay, what else could I do if I wasn't an academic? And Duolingo came to mind immediately. I was a Duolingo user. I really liked the app. It just felt like, well, that would be an interesting place to work at using the skills I have. And so right there, I just checked their job website, and they happened to have a job ad that was just written like for me, with exactly the skills that I had. And so I decided to apply because, well, it seems like written in the stars. And things happened very fast. Actually, the next day, they contacted me and invited me on site. So I went there a few weeks later, and I got the job, and so I took it. It was just, I think it's probably not the usual way. And right now, at the time, the company was much smaller, so the interview process was much quicker. Now it takes a little bit longer, but that was my trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great to hear. So I'm kind of wondering then if there were particular skills that you feel like you highlighted that could be broadly applicable to things just as a grad student that everyone's kind of harnessing. Did you highlight any of those? And maybe what were those, and if you thought they helped?
Well, definitely in my case, part of the skills that they were looking for was just my expertise in the research area that I worked in. So that was definitely part of it. But in terms of the general skills, they were looking for somebody who can communicate well with across the different roles that they have, right? So working at a place like Duolingo, at any company, you work with people across different roles, like engineers, designers, product managers. And so what I remember from the interview is that I just talked to a lot of people, and we brainstormed a lot of problems that Duolingo had at the time. And it was just a lot about figuring out how we would actually work together. And I felt like I tried to listen to what they were saying. I tried to really provide my ideas and really make it into a real brainstorm. And it felt like, this could be, we could be working this way together. And so I think that's what they liked about me. It was a clear, good fit. So I think that would be my advice, to try to always, of course, you'll have to figure out for yourself if this is a good fit for you, but try to imagine yourself during the interview as, okay, this is kind of like a trial. How would it be to actually work with these people? And so try not to treat it as much as an interview, but, okay, this is like a trial day, and try to actually work with them. Try to solve, a lot of the interview is about solving some problems that are similar to the ones you would be solving working there. And so try to approach it this way. Try to show how you would collaborate with people.
Yeah, I think my recommendation for this is that I think when you're in graduate school and you're doing science, and especially if you're doing bench research like I was doing, I think what we get caught up in a lot of times is, I'm like a specialist in EMT, and I know this transcription factor, and I know how this does X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And you say, and that's your life as a grad student, right? You're supposed to become an expert in that. I think one thing that I've always tried to like kind of, not sell myself about, but just to kind of tell people is that I think, one, you're an expert on that topic, but also try to sell the fact that you're also flexible and that you're, as a scientist, one of your strengths is like, I know how to do Western blots and whatever gels and do qPCR, all those types of things, but then you say, but I know how to adapt that into, I don't know, I'm going to transition from cancer to now neuro or pediatrics or something kind of outside of the box of what you're doing and say, I'm thinking about how I can use my skills to adapt into this setting. Because I think the big jump and scary part about going from academics into industry is, oh, I don't know anything about industry. But I think the key thing is to think about how your skill set is useful for industry in that position that you're looking for, and showing that you're flexible and you're able to apply your skill set into what they're looking for.
And that's if I can follow up on this, because I think it's a really good point. When I interviewed, actually, I remember the people I talked to telling me, well, we interviewed other people, and they seemed so specialized because they presented well, everybody is specialized, right? Me too. But they presented their very small research area. So, they were looking for people who researched language learning, and so there were people who were coming in and saying, okay, so here's how learning Hungarians works when you are a native speaker of English. And it's okay, great, but how do we apply it generally to Duolingo where we're teaching all kinds of languages? So I think what worked for me is that I tried to do basically what Annie was saying, presented this in more general terms. So my research was also pretty narrow, as all research projects are, but I tried to really think about how to present it in more general terms and how this would apply to the Duolingo context. And this turned out to be successful. And looking at all the job candidates that we have come in over the years, I feel like that's something that always works when people try to show that their expertise is more general and more applicable to the whole company instead of focusing on the narrow expertise that you have.
Great. So in that kind of same vein, along the lines of things that maybe people aren't doing as well in these interview processes, or just in the job in general, were there specific struggles that you had in those first few months of transition? I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to some of those before we open it up to audience questions.
I think for me, since I relatively recently transitioned into a different role, and they're actually pretty dynamically different in terms of job function. So I think the struggles I had was, it's kind of, you kind of had to kind of have some foresight into like, okay, it may be a little bit of a process. So start thinking about like, oh, I want to learn about this new role. And so I was actually, at Pfizer, they're actually pretty good about kind of developing new roles, and if you want to learn about something different, like, go for it. And so I would say easily for a year, I kind of had this on my radar, and I've always worked with my manager and kind of being upfront about it and saying, I'm interested in learning this. And then kind of taking your time, and just that interest in learning slowly develops into knowing people and trying to convince them that, again, that flexibility. Like, I may have been doing clinical development and in clinical trials for the last 5 years, but I think this is how I can use that experience to benefit kind of myself and the group as a whole in this new role. And I think that helped in terms of just kind of, and so it's just kind of taking some time to kind of plan. And I think sometimes that's hard to do for all of us. And I think I was in this leadership program a couple months ago, and the big thing that they want to do is always have you reflect upon what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Like, and be constantly always working on that and thinking about it. And so I think that's kind of the same thing. Like, think about what you're trying to kind of do, and it moves and it goes along kind of a very squiggly line sometimes. But I think once you kind of have a plan, you can kind of work towards it. And if it doesn't pan out or something you don't like, you kind of veer back into something else. So I think for me, it's kind of just planning ahead.
For me, I think the biggest struggle was kind of adopting this collaborative mindset that you really need when you're working at Duolingo, and I imagine in many other companies where everything is very collaborative. You work on teams, and everything is done really through discussions, and you have to find a way to communicate well with everybody, and to when you provide ideas, when you brainstorm things, you have to respect all the contributions of everybody else. And I feel like in grad school, in academia, you kind of get trained in doing the opposite, in this kind of competitive mindset, at least in the field of linguistics, that's how I felt. Because you're supposed to be able to really argue forcefully for your point, your theory, and be competitive and try to really be the best. And in industry, it really doesn't work this way. This is actually a negative. So you have to step back and learn to listen more, learn to actually forget about, leave your ego at home and really think more about the goal of what we are trying to achieve. Compromise, be flexible again, negotiate with others. And that was very difficult for me. But I feel like it's a very important skill to gain. So as much as possible, try to learn it while you're in grad school.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we're taught to be like critical and be like reading manuscripts and be like, oh, this figure is stupid. Like,
exactly.
And that's not very productive working in industry or working in teams. So I think that's a really good point.
Nobody wants to work with you if you start doing that, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah.
I wonder if there's ways that you can suggest that we start to get out of that mindset now then, like during grad school. Maybe there's, it's a larger conversation.
Yeah, it's hard, but I feel like even just talking to people across different disciplines helps, just so that you get used to, appreciating other points of view. Because if you just talk to your peers within your field, it seems like you all have very similar perspectives. And if you have to explain maybe what you do, convince people of your ideas, people who have very different backgrounds, then you might start realizing how you need to phrase what you're saying more carefully. I don't know if I have other advice other than just trying to basically talk to people who are different from you, who have different backgrounds. I think that would help.
I think that's really great. And what I'm also hearing is that it's really important to reflect on you and your strengths and to build those. So I do want to just pitch really quickly. If you go to the Career Center website through UCSD, there's a lot of resources to help you identify what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I found it personally very helpful. So thank you. And with that, I want to open it up to the audience. Do you guys have any questions? Maybe something we haven't touched on, something we have. So we'll go ahead and get you the microphone, so we have that for the recording.
Can I kind of ask, what's the background of most of the students in the room are? What programs are you guys in? Is it engineering or life science or linguistics?
Engineering, guys, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, life sciences, great. Social sciences, awesome.
Okay.
Arts and humanities, nice. Thank you.
Nice.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, no, go ahead. Okay.
Great, yeah. Natasha?
Hi. So I'm kind of going off of what you were talking about earlier with networking. Going to these career events, I've learned that networking is key. But what you were mentioning before was that networking amongst your peers is important, and you said that it's difficult to kind of cold go to a stranger. But I wonder, from your perspective, where you probably have been on the receiving end of some of those cold approaches, how does that feel to you? Because to me, what goes through my mind when I do these when I think about doing these cold approaches is it's so blatant that what I'm doing is just kind of talking to this person for my benefit.
No, I think from my perspective, I mean, I don't mind them, but I think what's hard is sometimes with these like kind of cold meetings that you kind of just do one-off is like, it's a couple minutes, and sometimes like, I mean, it's worthwhile. Maybe if you're like applying for a job, you'd be like, oh yeah, I talked to that person. They seem cool. Like that could just already be kind of like your step in the door, right? Just because you're like, oh yeah, that person seemed like they were smart and easy to work with. In those couple minutes I met them. So I think they're worthwhile. I don't think that they're completely useless, but I think sometimes networking, and if you know somebody or someone within your peer network, if you can do like just a tiny little project or something that you can show some sort of deliverable, or say like, hey, are you interested in something that you're doing or interested in? And just following up email, so saying like, oh, here's that information if you're interested in looking, like, thanks for meeting. Like something that you can almost like deliver or do a little project or do something can, I think, really show like initiative or the ability for that person to kind of follow through. And I think that's all, that just means $1 million. So yeah, so I don't think those cold introductions are completely useless, but I think they're just hard sometimes. Like they can be really uncomfortable. Like I don't like doing that. Like it's not fun. So it's just, I'm just saying that sometimes your peer networking could be like the easiest thing to do and take advantage of it because they're your friends and they have networks and they know people and it really does grow from there. And so just don't forget them. And I don't think a lot of times they focus on networking as just like, oh, this person is coming in, you should go meet them even though you don't know anything about them. So I think they're useful, but it could be harder. So yeah.
Okay.
And if I can add to it, I would really encourage you to contact people on LinkedIn, by email, if you can find their email, especially if there is a job that you are particularly interested in or you do feel like you're a good fit for the company. I often get contacted this way, and I don't always reply, but I have replied many times. And what makes it more likely for me to reply, well, one, if they go through some person that I know, right, a friend of a friend, then I definitely feel like, okay, I should talk to this person. But if you don't have that, when I see that a person might be a good fit, then I want to talk to them because then I want to recruit them. I want to make sure that I tell them how amazing Duolingo is and that they should really apply and work at Duolingo. So if you're a strong candidate, then it's also in my interest to talk to you. So definitely do that. Don't get discouraged because often, sure, you won't get responses from everybody, but sometimes you will, and sometimes it's going to work out.
Okay. And then also, I guess of people who get hired, what do you think is the percentage of people who got in there via networking versus solidly like just cold, they sent in their resume and they're an amazing fit?
I feel like a lot, oh gosh, I feel like maybe, my opinion is maybe like 75% of the time, it's like, whether you know that person directly or like someone knew that person who's applying. Like, I feel like there's always, the second that someone knows somebody, even if it's like 2 or 3 degrees apart, like, I think those are usually, I would say majority of the time, are what kind of brings in people initially. But that's kind of my impression. I don't know if you have a different.
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes we hire people that that we know through there's some network there, but it goes the other way around. That person applied like we're recruiting them. So somebody knows somebody and we tell them, hey, you should really apply, instead of like what we were just discussing, that you're trying to get a job. So I feel like it's true that there's often some connection, but it might be going the other way around. I feel like we do hire a lot of people who just apply. It's not like unusual.
Yeah, it's not unusual, but yeah.
We definitely, and even if we have referrals, I look through a lot of applications, and the referral, it carries some weight, but not, I look at the resumes, and that's more important. They still have to do a good job. I wouldn't hire somebody just because, they were referred by somebody from the company.
Yeah. Still has to be qualified, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for your question. So I saw a question up here. Can we bring the mic right up here? Thanks.
Hi, so I was wondering you said that you got your postdoc, or you got your full-time position from your postdoc position. Is that usually common in industry? Because I've actually heard that sometimes with a lot of these big pharma companies, they usually don't take their postdocs as a full-time hire. I'm not really sure why that is or anything, but do you think that you just got lucky that there was a full-time position opening after you were almost done, or?
I guess I did shoot myself in the foot when I said I got lucky. I'm very qualified now. But no, I think that it's not the issue with the industry, but a reality of industry is that things wax and wane a lot of times. And so I think even if they really like you, sometimes there's just not that ability to hire somebody, or that bandwidth or the funds or anything like that, where the need for you to come on. So I think that's probably the bigger issue. If you performed well, I think the thing is that even all those people that you work with also know people at other companies. So if you're a good candidate, they will say, hey, I know blah, 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 she's great, do you guys have, that really does become the whole networking thing. So I think the program that I was in was kind of specific, but it was, I think we probably had a 75% hire rate. So I think it was pretty good from my experience. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
May, could you bring it up here?
I can talk about it. Okay. So my question is about in comparing academia with industry. Just could I get you guys to talk a little bit about what your least favorite aspect of both is, and what your most favorite aspect of both is?
So let's see, academia, I think what's amazing about it is the freedom of research that you generally have. So you get to decide, kind of your own boss in a way, and I think that's largely true. That's not true in industry. If you have a research job, what you do is largely driven by the needs of the product. The disadvantage of academia for me, it's I think what I mentioned earlier. It's hard to stay motivated. It's hard to know if you have any impact. You write papers and you don't know if anybody reads them. This whole process is slow and just really frustrating. Whereas in industry, it's fast-paced. You see the impact of what you do immediately, and that's actually what I love about it. It's motivating, but again, you're kind of restricted in what you can do because, well, you have to do what's good for the company. So there might be some projects that you work on that you're not crazy about, but well, you kind of have to do them. So you have a little bit less freedom.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think with industry, unlike academia, kind of on the same lines, is that I think if you like the fact that what you're doing might change rather suddenly. And you say, okay, cool, like I wasn't completely married. Like you can't be married to like your project or your research or something because like it could change on a dime. Like I was working on a study in non-small cell lung cancer, we're developing a new drug, blah, blah, blah. Worked on it for like a year and then we get an email saying it's canned. Like, and there's a business decision and all these types of things. Like to me, I was like, I think what I like industry, I was like, okay, cool, like I make whatever. Like, okay, what's the next thing? So like, you take on the next challenge. So I think to me, like I like that. So I was like, okay, now I'm going to be learning about renal cell carcinoma today. Like I'm going to start all over and learn everything I can do about this. So to me, I like that. So I think that's what's great about industry. And then I don't know. I feel like, yeah, with academia, I maybe feel like it's a little bit more kind of straight arrow kind of. And like it's just a little bit more dynamic in academia or in industry. So I think that's what I really like about it and kind of the pros and cons of that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think to your point, in finding it difficult to keep up motivation, I think a lot of us understand that sentiment. And you mentioned also sometimes working on projects that you don't necessarily feel excitement for. How do those two compare? Like if we understand what that feels like to feel unmotivated, does it feel very similar to the experiences we're having now, or is it different in how you cope with having to kind of work on these products that you're not crazy about?
Oh, I feel like in academia it was much worse. I mean, I highly recommend
to hear.
to everybody to go to industry because it's way better for many reasons. I feel like even when I work on things that I'm just not excited about this particular project. Again, like Andy said, things change very quickly, and I'm still excited about the mission that we have overall, or I know where this project fits in, and I know why it's important to do. So I'm still motivated to do it, even though, maybe the reality of day-to-day completing it, that's maybe, I'm not as excited about it. But yeah, it's still not at all like what I felt in academia, or like where I was really frustrated and I found it really hard to see the point of what I was doing. In industry, I feel like I always see the point. It's always, I know what the goals are, and I know maybe sometimes I don't agree with what we're doing. Maybe sometimes I feel like, well, we should be focusing on something else, but I understand the reasons why we're doing things. So I think it's still much better.
Yeah, and I think when we say that like things can change suddenly, it's also like it changes suddenly within like your kind of expertise and group. It's not like suddenly I'm a clinical pharmacologist and the next day I'm like, I don't know, a botanist or like, I don't know, like something completely random. So like, it's like you're still using your brain and you're still using what you know, but it's just like the type of work is changing. It's not so much like it completely changes. So yeah.
Did we have a question?
Yeah. So my question, you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but it has to do with leadership. And what I found is a lot of PhDs are placed in positions of leadership because they're found to be like the experts in their field, the most qualified. Do you feel like you gained those kind of leadership skills when you were in graduate school? And if you did, how did you do it? And if you didn't, how did you make up for that when you were put in those roles?
Do we train graduate students for that? I don't know. I don't think explicitly. I honestly think that scientists who gain really high positions within companies or research positions, I think they're just really good at looking at the big picture. I think that's generally what makes them kind of have those roles. And I think I touched upon this too, where I think sometimes as graduate students we kind of get pigeonholed in like, oh, you need to think about this and know everything about this. But it's really important to kind of just step back and think about what does this mean on a bigger picture, because I don't know. And from what my experience is that those types of leaders in industry are usually very good at kind of knowing the bigger picture. And the skill set I think everyone has, like if you can present, if you can talk to people, and those are the things that I think are critical for any sort of leadership position. So, and I don't want to I hate it when I was a student too, and they said networking. So I was like, and just talking to people and networking, it really is kind of important. So, yeah.
I feel like in terms of developing leadership or kind of management skills, like the things that you can do a little bit is, when you have your research assistants or teaching assistants, and that gives you a little bit of experience with this kind of side of leadership. It's still not exactly the same as the way it is when you work at a company, but it's better to have that experience than not to have it. And I've definitely found that to be useful as I moved to this kind of management role within the company. That, okay, I know I've worked with people, I supervised people before, and this helped me, but it's still a learning experience. I'm not sure, it's kind of difficult to learn, to get those skills in grad school, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is again, trying to think outside the box in terms of like how your skill set applies to what they want, right? You mentioned like TAing and being a grad assistant or whatever. Just saying, if people ask, have you ever managed a group before or managed people? You can say, no, but I have taught a class or something where you're like, I had to a lot of times manage time and manage students and manage kind of goals and objectives. So those types of things I think are kind of applicable to that. For me, sometimes I haven't managed like a large group, but like I was working per diem at CVS at one time just to get extra money to pay my student loans. And so, yeah, and just a lot of times when I apply for actually industry jobs, they did ask me that, like, do you have experience managing people? And I just said no, but not directly, but as a pharmacist, like in that kind of setting, you say all the techs and everyone that's kind of around you, you're like the point person. And so you say, I didn't directly manage them, but I learned to manage a group and time and goals and kind of strategically in just those 4 hours I was there or something to say, this is what we need to get done. And so, yeah, so just kind of thinking about how certain academic skill sets can kind of translate into industry type skill sets.
Yeah, and definitely if you can think of ways of mentoring others, then those are the kinds of skills that you can develop that are management-like, that are useful.
I noticed that both of you have had postdocs as part of your career path from graduate school to industry. Do you feel like that was necessary, and what were the pros and cons of doing the postdoc before entering industry fully?
Do you want to go first? Okay. I thought it was a nice foot in the door. I think it made my journey into industry a lot easier. And also gave me an opportunity to also see if I actually liked it. Because I think there is a little bit of a part of you that's a little bit scared to say, okay, now I'm actually going into industry. I think I would have liked it, but this postdoc experience kind of allows you that flexibility to still kind of be a trainee and see if this is something that you actually like to do. So I think that's a great positive of it. And of course, meeting people. To me, I think the biggest negative is like still being poor. Like still being paid like a postdoc. I think it's probably the biggest drawback of it. I mean, obviously it opened up a lot of doors, so I think overall experience was great. I mean, if you can get into industry with that one, then awesome. But I think from my personal experience is that I think that's really kind of opened up a lot of doors for me.
Yeah, I would say something similar. It's not necessary, and we hire, for my team, we hire people right after their PhD, and that's fine, but I do agree that it's useful. I feel like for me, my application was much stronger when I applied for the job. I knew my field of research much better, so which really helped my job, and I think it gave me more experience working with a variety of people, which again helped kind of transition to this highly collaborative environment, working with people with very different backgrounds. so I feel like it just let me progress much more quickly in my job because I already had some more relevant experience.
Yeah, I think once I got out of my postdoc, I think I can really hit the ground running. Like, I was a lot more equipped to be like, okay, now I can do this. Like, you don't have to hold my hand. And I think if you kind of go into it without any experience, they're going to expect more out of you because they are paying you full time, like you're hired. And so the postdoc can be a nice training wheels sometimes. So, yeah.
Yeah.
On a maybe related note, I'm curious if you've experienced in your jobs any like structured skill development or training, or if it's mostly been on the job for you guys.
So for me, at Duolingo, we have a lot of structured trainings, especially for training new managers. So that's what I went through. There's a whole series of workshops where you get trained on how to manage, and you get assigned a mentor, which is very useful. So yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, I think there's opportunities also to kind of, I'm in a kind of a leadership forum thing right now, training. So yeah, so it's definitely opportunities on the job. I think formally and kind of like a more didactic type of setting, and also, yeah, obviously a lot of it is just gained by doing your day-to-day work too.
And you're getting a lot of feedback during that time on like how you're progressing?
Yeah, I think I have. I think one thing that this leadership training and kind of other things I've done too is like really kind of just feedback is like golden sometimes, and you can't be defensive about it. So I think being really open to feedback, and I went to one thing where they said if you presented and they said, oh, it was really great, that's like the worst thing to hear. Like, even if they said it was wonderful, like everything was perfect, but they were like, the more important thing is like you probably did something that you can improve on. Everybody does. So like really ask for those, what did I not do great? Because even if it was just okay, what can I just work on that? Because being proactive about that, kind of always reflecting upon what you need to kind of work on, and in addition to always building your strengths too, but kind of being aware about that.
And that's actually a very good point in general. I feel like that's a good skill to develop, to be open to feedback. Like Andy said, there's always something you can improve. And in industry, I mean, that's just part of your day-to-day that you receive feedback, and you can't be defensive about it. You have to learn to really accept it and be willing to improve. And a lot of people struggle with it at first. I see it on my team, and so I don't know if a lot of it is probably personality related, but I feel like a lot of it is just that in grad school, I mean, we get feedback, but it's usually about your paper, and it's not this kind of direct feedback about how you're doing in your job. So I feel like it takes a little bit to get used to, but it's really important.
I always tell people I had an Asian mother, so nothing you can say can scare me. I was like, bring it on. Like, yeah.
Are there any final questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hi. So, not to sound cynical, but there are industry skills and then there are industry skills. So in my field, I have looked at industry positions, and I feel like the things that I do are not applicable to those positions ever. Like, I don't have those skill sets. I only have a skill set that's good for academia, besides the stuff that people say, like, oh, you're a PhD, you're flexible, you can learn stuff fast, you can talk to people, you can write. So what would you recommend people do if they feel like they need to transition to industry, but the job ad doesn't seem like they're advertising for someone like you? Sorry for the dark, sad question.
Can you give us some more details?
I know, yeah.
I don't. So I'm in linguistics, and I am very formal. I'm Eric's student. Sorry. So I'm very formal, and I'm like a field worker. So I don't, I'm not a computational. That's, in our field, computational and applied linguistic skills and things like second language acquisition tend to be what you see in industry jobs. So I didn't want to like make this about me. I wanted this to be broad. But like, what do you do if you're like, if you train to be an academic but you can't?
Well, I would say gain those skills. Unfortunately, that's not an answer you want to hear, but I think that's kind of what you need to do if you want to get an industry job, because I'm not sure there are jobs that are, like you have to have some skills, right? So like for linguistics, what you said, well, either go the computational route, kind of data science, all that, or go the route of, right, more like the applied linguistics, language teaching. Those are the kinds of skills, but I don't think it's impossible. Even if you, just getting some experience as a linguist, you have a lot of skills. It's just you're missing maybe some elements. So try to add to your skill set. So, for example, just trying to get experience teaching languages, like that would actually make you attractive for a company like Duolingo, where we want linguists, but we need them to have some additional skills, like understand how language learning works, how language teaching works.
Sorry to make that hyper-specific. I didn't mean to.
No, that's great. Well, I'm wondering if you would be open to someone, if they saw a job ad, there are skills that they're lacking, if they reached out to you saying, how do I acquire these skills? Do you feel equipped to help them? Or I guess even maybe not as specific, but more broadly, just kind of guide, like, are you open to those things or someone in your position?
I guess it depends what they're lacking exactly, because some things you can learn on the job. And we also have internships where kind of the standards are different, and we accept people and we just mostly want them to be smart, and then we teach them a lot of things. But then, right, it just kind of depends. Like, we wouldn't hire just like a formal linguist, right? Because it's just too much to learn. We wouldn't be able to teach them everything on the job. So it's just, kind of hard to answer in general.
Yeah. I think sometimes just maybe more general. Sometimes you have to take a step back a little bit and do like an internship or something.
Yeah.
And then before you can kind of like steamroll and kind of move forward. So.
Before we wrap up, are there any other questions? Any burning questions? No? Okay, so are there any last bits of advice that you kind of came in wanting to share with us? Any tips on what we can do now, to better prepare ourselves, make us better candidates?
For me, I think, at least for life sciences and healthcare, I think just being, like, do your research, think about what things that you might be interested outside of academics. I think a lot of times, especially since I know when I was in grad school and a lot of my classmates, I think a lot of us just say, like, I don't want to do academics. But that's not like start to create a little bit of a plan and start to explore. I think you're so lucky to be in San Diego and UCSD, where there is this kind of like network of kind of life sciences and biotechs and large pharma and small pharma. Like, there's a lot of that opportunity there. So if you're actually interested in it, there are definitely opportunities to kind of explore it, even just a tiny bit, and look at internships and fellowships and postdocs and things that might be interesting to you, and go on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm a grad student at UCSD, and I think I see that you're a postdoc fellow at wherever, and I want to learn more about your program. Like, it can be that easy sometimes. So I think having more of a plan other than I don't want to be in academics. And so that's one. I think two is flexibility. I think that's so key. And learning how to flex your skills into different positions, and saying, well, I'm a master at mass spec, so I'm going to do mass spec. And that's the only thing I can do. No, think about how you can kind of apply that into different settings too. So, yeah.
I have maybe some just kind of practical advice for when you're actually applying. First, apply fast. So in academia, the hiring, the application cycle is like really long, and you apply in the fall, and it takes months. In industry, you have to react really fast because we try to fill in positions as soon as possible. When we post an ad, we want the person right now. And so if you apply earlier, you actually have a higher chance of getting an interview because we start interviewing, and as soon as we find somebody we like, we hire them. So, like a job ad may be gone in a month, right? So just don't wait. Applications are often pretty easy. They're less involved than academic applications, so you don't have to write your research statement, right? You can actually, for research positions, you can generally submit your CV. You don't even have to write a separate resume. I would also say write cover letters. Always write a cover letter. When I do the initial screening of applications, I don't always look at the cover letter, but for the candidates I'm unsure about, I will. I always do. If they don't submit one, then, well, they are probably out. And also, if you make it to the on-site interview, that's something that everybody looks at for more information. It doesn't have to be long, but just write something that expresses clear interest in the company. And just kind of do your research about the company. Show that you are actually interested in this job. Because that's always a red flag for us that, okay, this person applied, but they never even tried Duolingo. And they never used it. And okay, I guess this person is really not interested. So just really make sure to convey that you are interested in this position. You want to work for this company. There's so many candidates who just don't seem to do that. And it's never good. And just when you are on site, again, make sure, what I mentioned earlier, treat it as, like, try to imagine working with these people, because that's what they are trying to find out. Are you a good person to work with? And so try to show that you are. Try to ask questions. Many candidates come in and sometimes it seems like sometimes they misunderstand the instructions, but they are afraid to ask questions. They don't want to ask for clarification. Don't be afraid to do that. You'll look good if you actually engage in a conversation and ask more questions. Oh, well, what do you mean by this? And so on. So again, try to be collaborative. And yes, show interest. I can't emphasize it enough. Be interested in the particular job and company.
Maybe one thing I'll add. For people who are interested in drug development, I think a lot of people in graduate school are always afraid like they don't know anything about it. I think one great and really dry, boring resource to use is if you go into a drug, every drug and every drug company, big or small, has to provide the FDA with a package insert. And this package insert essentially is everything that a regulatory agency needs an industry drug development company to provide information on and fill out every single thing in there. Sometimes they're 5 pages, sometimes they're like 50 pages. But I think that's a really great starting point to be like, oh, a company like Merck has to do all these studies to fill in every single one of these sections into a package insert, and that's what gets a drug approved. And it's extensive, and I don't think a lot of people can appreciate it. And I think one thing for graduate students and scientists to do is like, oh, I see that they need to fully describe the mechanism of action of a drug. There must be a bunch of preclinical work that goes into it. So start to think about and use that as maybe a jumping off point to be like, what are the things that an industry is actually kind of interested in order to get a drug approved if you're kind of interested in that space.
I'd also like to plug in the grAdvantage resources that Tamara mentioned earlier. If you're looking to kind of build some of these skills that we mentioned, do some self-exploration, those are great places to start on campus as well. So with that, I guess we'll wrap up. If you could please let me, or join me in thanking the panelists. This was wonderful. Thank you, guys. It's really great. So we have a buffet dinner available now, and we welcome you guys all to stay and chat, network with our panelists, with each other. Thank you guys so much for coming.